So let's go to good stuff. Let's go to God's Word. That will be much better. So let's start with a prayer and pray for those of you who are present. And maybe we'll have a couple of people watching online. We hope you're with us now because we're at our starting time. So we pray. Gracious Lord, continue to open our hearts and lives to you this day as we look at your Word. And of course, we continue to pray for our country and pray that you might be present in these trying times, that you would give guidance and direction. So open people's hearts, open our hearts, open our lives to you. At this moment, we ask in your most precious name. Amen. So last time we finished off, we did unproductive fig tree. We then did the cleaning of the temple, and then we followed up with stuff about, it's interesting that the withered fig tree even comes up today in a different way as well. But just a couple of comments about the comments. You can read them through yourself. We don't know. The biggest thing on the first two or three are kind of, I think, important things. The time that Jesus is looking for figs is when no fruit could be found. Number 2 is talking that. And the more I thought about this, and as I read other people on it, they say, for Jesus then to expect it, it's kind of people going, so what's going on here? Like there's something there. And so I think maybe that's why it is. And number 3 tries to point out symbolic actions from Old Testament prophets. So this is kind of a symbolic action of a New Testament guy. Can you tell me any symbolic action of an Old Testament prophet? Anyone come to mind?
Symbolic action.
Things that they did that were unusual to make a point. There's the prophet, I think it was Jeremiah, who stripped down naked as part of his, to say this is what's going to happen to you. Wasn't it Jeremiah who made up the little city out of clay and all of that stuff? Just talk about how destruction's coming and all. And then, of course, isn't it Hosea who had his wife Gomer, who was not faithful to him? So his whole life is almost, that's a whole life is basically a kind of that, and as well, a symbolic action type thing. But the other interesting thing about fig tree, you got to think about, number 4 gets to start to speak to that. It's really used in Old Testament times to talk about Israel's status before God and destruction of a fig tree associated with judgment at that. So all of that kind of fits together. And number 6, just the first bullet point in number 6, I'm going to read that one in full. Just as the leaves of the tree concealed the fact that there was no fruit to enjoy, so the magnificence of the temple and its ceremony conceals the fact that Israel has not brought forth the fruit of righteousness demanded by God. They will be judged. And so I think that's an important point to consider. This is what it's really trying to get to. Number 10, just the first sentence. Jesus told the tree that no one would ever again eat its fruit and said nothing of its destruction, but Peter will interpret that as a curse the next day. So anything surprising about the next part, the expulsion of the merchants from the temple precepts, as you think about this? Anything interesting about that? From when we talked about that, anything you was thinking about? The thing that always strikes me about that is, did anybody say, what are you doing? We don't have that reported. We will, in today's material, talk about, they'll say by whose authority, but they didn't say what he did was wrong. That's the thing that always interests me. The first ones here, you can read them yourselves. Apparently on the Mount of Olives, there had been markets there where you could buy the things that you needed. And it was actually considered almost part of the temple precepts because it's right nearby. And so for years and years, apparently there were these places where you could buy the stuff you needed then. And it's number 12 at the end emphasizes that according to writings at that time, Caiaphas introduced it about 40 years before the destruction of the temple. That would be at 30 AD. And so outside, it was not controlled by the high priest and all, but inside it's controlled by the high priest. And so it makes me wonder, it's about money and about control type things. People want a cut of it and all of that. And so Jesus in number 14, the emphasis, money changers, sellers, the people using the temple as a shortcut, this is the only act of violence recorded about Jesus. Because he turned things over, and he took a cord and was beating people, getting them out. So that's the only time, I don't know, I've not found another. Maybe you can think of another, but Jesus is usually doing the exact opposite instead of doing those things. And a big emphasis, I think, that number 15 adds, and a couple of these talk about, is that it was the Gentiles who were affected by this, because the place it's done is where Gentiles could be. And so if you've ever been to a county fair and go where near animals are being held, you know that there's lots of moving and sort of thing. And when the foul critters are there, there's lots of clucking, and there's all sorts of noise, all sorts of stuff. So that would be interesting as well. So 18 talks about that as well. 19, I think this is the last one I want to talk about. This one, 19. Jesus was appalled at this disregard for the sanctity of an area consecrated for the use of Gentiles who had not become full proselytes to Judaism. A proselyte is someone who would have converted into Judaism. So they're getting close, but they're not there yet. Last part, page 4, withered fig tree, faith and prayer. Do you notice that Jesus has no effort to try to interpret the event at that point? He doesn't say this is what it means. That's number 30. But it's clear that the withering of the tree serves as a vivid warning of impending judgment against Israel. And the details of the word used mean that it's totally destroyed. It is withered up from the roots, and no one will ever be able to eat figs from that. Reminded me of came to service this morning and walking up front to get stuff ready. I go, oh, look at that. There was one in particular, one poinsettia that was so dried up, all the leaves had gone, and I took it away. I should have brought it here as a good example. This is withered up. So there will be no, but I suppose it might come back. But it's kind of funny. Sorry?
Miss Linda Brown took it.
She says she has a brown thumb, so I don't know what that means.
I don't know, but she took it, so I saw it.
So it was withered up,
It
right?
was bad, yeah.
The leaves were rolled up inside themselves. I don't know that. I thought of that. Anyway. Okay. And so then, but it's interesting then that Jesus, what he talks about are things about prayer. Therefore, I tell you, everything you pray and ask for, believe that you have received it, and it will be yours. Whatever you stand praying, and whenever you stand praying, if you have anything against anyone, forgive him, so that your Father in heaven will also forgive you your wrongdoing. These sayings are interesting, and I think they're very helpful. But the fascinating thing is, if you read some people on these, they say these were taken from someplace else and put here. I'm going, no, I don't like that. But I can see where they get it from because they don't directly follow what's there before. Because Jesus does not really speak to anything about that at this point. I think he kind of will touch on that in chapter 12 as we start to look at the parable of the vineyard owner. I think he touches on it then because that's really talking, the whole thing then talks about destruction for Israel at all. So those are a few comments about what we did before. Anybody want to talk any more about that? Or you want to go into new stuff? Or you want to go home?
We're ready to move forward.
Okay, I can't tell when mouths are covered with. Get a beverage again. My mouth is dry. Okay, we are doing two sections here. Hopefully we'll do chapter 11, 27 to 33. This is about authority. And then we'll start in on chapter 12. And all of these things, Jesus' authority is being challenged by the religious leaders. And so this was called a contest of questions. That's interesting. they came again to Jerusalem. Remember, Jesus and his disciples are staying in Bethany. So they're staying outside of town, and they keep coming into town, and that's why they see the fig tree, because they're going back and forth. As he was walking in the temple, the chief priests and the scribes and the elders came and asked him. So what's interesting is he's walking in the temple. It's kind of fun. The language that's used there is the same type of language that would be used of the Greek philosophers as they're walking around talking. And so it's just interesting how that language is the same. And so the chief priests, the scribes, and the elders come. So who are these folks? These are the people that will make up the Sanhedrin. So these are the folks. Now there's something about Jesus. They're going to be checking him out. Did we hear about them on the triumphal entry? We didn't hear anything about them at all. There's nothing mentioned about them there. But now they're interested. What's happened? What's happened in between is, I don't think they even know anything about the fig tree parts, but they know about the cleansing of the temple. And if all the information I've read is true, that the temple, the activities there were under their control, and I sometimes think that they are taking too much, but they're supposed to take, what did I read? 1/24 of a shekel for each. That could be the profit they could make from one, and that was 1/24 because that much of the silver could have gone off of the shekel or something like that. Seemed like an odd thing to me, but that's what the scholars are saying on such. So anyway, so this was directly affecting them. And so they're coming and asking him. And again, notice, no place does it say, what you did is wrong. I don't know. If you read it, does it say what you did is wrong? They're asking, by what authority are you doing these things? Who gave you this authority to do these things? It's all about authority. Whose authority? Who said you could do it? And why? Well, not really so much why you're doing it, but who said you could do these things? Authority is interesting. Exousia, ruling authority. Jesus will be asked about this in the future. By what authority? There's another, well, we'll get to that later. By what authority are you doing these things? Who said you could do it? Who said he could do it? He said he could do it, right? Because he's God and all of that, but they don't like that. But Jesus often does this. This is typical Jesus. He doesn't answer the question the way they expect. He sometimes never even talks about the question that the person asked. He uses the opportunity to do something else. And so what does he do? He kind of turns it right back to them, says, you answer me, I'll answer you. I will ask you one question, then answer me. And I will tell you by what authority I do these things. Was John's baptism from heaven or human origin? Answer me. So what's the problem? Did they believe in John's baptism? No. So what's the problem? Why can't they say it's not, it's just human? It's obviously not from God, since we are not involved in it. The problem is that the people really liked John and what he did. Remember, well, we got that in today's gospel lesson. All Judea and Jerusalem, the whole area, everybody is going out there. And if you read other gospels, I think it's in John where it talks about where they say, well, what should we do? Even the soldiers are saying, what should we do? Different specific groups of people. And so all the religious leaders are going out there as well, probably more to look and take notes and such. But everyone's going out to see John. And so they're afraid of the answer. If they say from human authority, the people are going to be upset. If they say from heaven, then he'll say, then why didn't you believe him and do what he said? I mean, so it's kind of it's a gotcha question, I guess, right? That's a good description. We're going to get you no matter how you respond. I don't know. Would you think of a question like that if you were confronted by something like this? These are the types of things I think about afterwards. laying in bed after you go through a difficult situation, you go, oh, I should have said whatever type thing. Okay. So they discussed it among themselves. Where did that one go? It's supposed to be there. If we say from heaven, he will say, then why don't you believe him? But if we say of human origin, they will be afraid of the crowd because everyone thought that John was truly a prophet. So the answer Jesus, after thoroughly reasoning, that's the word that's used there, dialogizomai, thoroughly trying to figure out the best answer. We don't know. And then Jesus said, I'm not going to answer you either. Authority will continue to come up. And Jesus last week, who said you could do this? Who gave you the authority and all? And I think they're getting the idea by now. It doesn't say it, but I think they're afraid that Jesus believes it is from heaven. It's not just human authority, that he speaks with God's authority, and that's going to cause them trouble and difficulty coming up. Just take a break. See if there was anything else you need to say. You all are awfully quiet. While this verse does not say so, the leader should be able to infer that Jesus claims to have authority from heaven. Yep. And that this little authority battle, if you will, leads us right into the next. Because then he's beginning to speak in parables. And it is a plural form, so it's going to be more than one. To whom is this parable spoken? It's the same group of people. We're going to have people around. We're going to have the Pharisees, the Sadducees. Make sure I get all the guys right. We're going to have the chief priests, scribes, and elders there. We're going to have Pharisees hanging around. And so Jesus is going to tell a parable. Do you remember the parable of the vineyard owner? Just read it through real quick and we'll go back. A man planted a vineyard, put a fence around it, dug out a pit for a winepress, and built a watchtower. Then he leased it to tenant farmers and went away. At harvest time, he sent a servant to the farmers to collect some of the fruit of the vineyard from them. But they took him, beat him, and sent him away empty-handed. Again, he sent another servant to them, and they hit him on the head and treated him shamefully. Then he sent another, and they killed that one. And he also sent many others. Some they beat, and others they killed. He still had one to send, a beloved son. Finally, he sent him to them, saying, they will respect my son. But those tenant farmers said to one another, this is the heir. Come, let's kill him, and the inheritance will be ours. So they seized him, killed him, and threw him out of the vineyard. What then will the owner of the vineyard do? He will come and kill the farmers and give the vineyard to others. Haven't you read the scripture? The stone that the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. This came about from the Lord and is wonderful in our eyes. They were looking for a way to arrest him, but feared the crowd because they knew he had spoken this parable against them. So they left him and went away. So the they refers back to those groups, to scribes, keep saying chief priests, scribes, and elders. Keep wanting to say Pharisees. Chief priests, scribes, and elders. These are the ones that will speak. When you read this, what is it? Any thoughts come to your mind as you read through this? Okay. I knew how to keep the class involved.
Well, he's making it very plain. I mean, it's obvious who he's talking about, right? So they don't have to question what might the meaning of this be.
So is it against all Israel? It's against the leadership
Yeah.
of Israel. not against everybody. I mean, everybody has some issues too, but it's against the leaders themselves who have this problem. Sir?
What's the importance of the watchtower? Because if I look at a vineyard, you know, I can see having a press to squeeze out the juice from the grapes.
Okay.
But a watchtower seems out of place. That seems...
Apparently, in this time, it would be a very, the place I was reading through, I don't remember the guy's name, they went through and Darrett is the name of the guy. It's not, he is the fellow who's referred to, who's supposed to be an expert on this specific issue of property rights. Because this deals with property rights, believe it or not. Because if you were a tenant farmer, there would be certain things that you would expect the owner to do and certain things that you would be expected to do. And these are spelled out in a written document that each one would have. The owner would be responsible for for the vineyard, for the plants that would go in, be responsible for that, have that done. A fence or a hedge around it, and oftentimes these hedges were made with thorns and all to keep critters out, and also to keep people out who would try to come and steal some of the product as it's becoming fruitful. And that's the purpose of a watchtower. This fellow, what was the guy's name? Darrett also suggests that the watchtower would serve as a home for some of the tenant farmers as well. But it would be the place from which they could make sure that no one's coming in to try to steal some of the crop. That's apparently not an uncommon issue then, and so watchtowers were part of what it was done. Just, you know, it's very strange to us, but the world there is very strange to us. So it would be a 5-year process. It's not until the 4th year that they would expect really fruit to come on in the vineyard. And the 5th year is when the owner of the vineyard could then start to expect he would get 50% of the fruit. The people are not paid in money, the tenant farmers, they are paid in crop. They get to have a portion of that. And so they actually do not get cash, they get fruit. They are paid some before the crop is fruitful. They have certain things they have to do and such. And what's interesting is the words that are used. This fellow, Darrett, says this all fits in. The first year at harvest time in I skipped away. Then he leased it to tenant farmers and went away. The going away part is very, very important because he goes away, he leaves the country, and so he has to have people. Part of the agreement is you have to have people come regularly at scheduled times to continue to claim ownership and property. Otherwise, the people can say it's ours. And so that's what these people actually want to do in the parable, right? Kill the son. They figure, well, if he's sending the son, then he can't come himself. He must be dead. And Darrett says that if he's coming, you have to bring some sort of proof that you actually own the property. It's yours and it's not the tenant farmers instead. And so probably he had the original document with him. And so if they kill him, then hey, we've got it. There's no proof. It's our property type thing. And interestingly, Darrett also suggests, I don't know why he would suggest this, but he says they killed the fellow in the watchtower and threw him out because they wouldn't want the blood inside, because that would then pollute that and make part of it unclean and part of it could not be used and all. But I don't know why I would say they would take him outside, talk to him and kill him that way, but I don't know. It's just interesting. So long way to get around, but I think I got to why a watchtower, right? Yeah, it's interesting. So verse 2, at harvest time he sent a servant to collect some of the fruit of the vineyard from it. This is required to do per their agreement. And so what do? They beat him, they sent him away empty-handed. And part of what Darrett suggests is that empty-handed, part of any proof that he had for this was owned by the owner also they did not let him go with that. Verse 4, again he sent another servant to them and hit him in the head and treated him shamefully. It's interesting. I will get to that in a moment. I don't want to go there too fast. Hit him and treated him shamefully. Dishonor, to bring shame upon someone. Then he sent another, and they killed that one. Isn't that lovely? They killed him, caused him to die. He also sent many others. This is part of the agreement. We're up to about year 4 then. Some they beat, and others they killed. And this is where it gets key in verse 6. He still had one to send, a beloved son. You know, we heard, this is my son whom I love, in the gospel lesson today. It's a very similar language. A son whom he loves. Finally, he sent him to them saying, they will respect my son. This is the heir. They will respect. Did they respect him? No. They did not show any respect. Instead, they are plotting to have the farm as their own. The vineyard as their own. This is the heir. They're assuming that the owner is dead. He should have, according to Deemer, the documents that would need to prove ownership. Come, let's kill him, and the inheritance will be ours. And so that's what they did. They killed him, threw him out. And what will the owner do? Well, you can read it as well as I can. I'm going to read one thing from you from stuff I read. This is from Volz's. Volz has a commentary, a 2-part commentary on Mark. The 2-part commentary, each is the size of my study Bible. It's kind of a big thing. He has 60 pages on this one thing, so you can go. He goes into it in a little detail, should I say? Quite a bit of detail. So this is what he says. I'm going to read from him and stop portions of it. Given the Isaiah 5 parallel, and given the context of Mark 12, the decoding of the parable of the wicked tenants, i.e. the determination of the real reference, that's a fun word, tenor story seems pretty clear. And so he's going to go through and tell you what each part fits. Now, I was taught in seminary that a parable has one main point, and you don't make details about all of it. So I'm going to write him and say, hey, I'm concerned, I'm confused. But I'll share what he said. These are interesting. Number 1, the vineyard represents God's people under his gracious reign and rule. Well, that's Isaiah 7, because God says, my love is a vineyard. And so he uses that very often of the people. Number 2, the owner is the Lord God of Israel. That's Isaiah 5. The tenants are the leaders of God's people who are to care for them. Here specifically those who have just appeared on the scene in Mark's narrative, namely the chief priests, the scribes, and the elders. Number 4, the hedge, wine vat, and tower represent everything God has done to give his people every blessing. And so God has provided all that they need, just as the landowner has provided all that they need. The 3 slaves, and many others, verse 12, verse 5, are prophets sent to call the leaders to repentance. And he talks about Jeremiah 7:25, where it's exactly, the words are exactly what are used in the Septuagint. You know what the Septuagint is? Can I use that word? Septuagint is the Greek translation of the Hebrew Old Testament. And so, interesting, some of the Psalms have some of the Psalms, Psalm 119 is actually 118, so I haven't looked again to see where that changes, but there are a few differences between them. Number 6, the farmers mistreated the slaves is the rejection of the prophets by Israel's leader. The killing of the 3rd messenger may represent the killing of John the Baptizer. Number 7, this one's obvious. The Son is the Son of God, Jesus. The Son coming is the Son of God, coming to claim his own possession. Number 9, the killing of the Son is the killing of the Son, the Lord, God's representative. Constitutes a repudiation of God's claim of lordship over his people. Number 10, the throwing of the Son out of the vineyard may indicate the Son's death outside Jerusalem, but it may simply indicate utter rejection of the Son's authority. I think he's going too far into detail, but I mean, it's interesting. Number 11, the destruction of the leaders is the destruction of the Jewish leadership over God's people. Two possible ways. Historically, Roman conquest. Roman conquest destroyed Jerusalem in what year? 70 AD. Keep that date in mind, it's important. Theologically, with the removal of the people of God from being under specifically and exclusively Jewish leadership. And number 12. 12 is the fun number it's used. The giving of the vineyard to others represents a move to a universal pan-ethnic leadership of God's people. Well, God fulfilled what he said he'd do for his people, right? The people are not following in the way. The leaders are leading away from what God wanted them to do. And so we end up with a parable that really speaks to them, to the leadership, saying that, you are going to be taken out of this position because of what you have not done. Interesting. I want to talk about 10 and 11, but I want to give you an opportunity if there's something you want to talk about up to that point. I must be really a great teacher. It's got everything going on. Or I've lost the class from the table. I'll just keep going then. If that's okay with you. So this quote is interesting. The quote, verse 10 and 11. The stone that the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. I was playing around with cornerstone. That's at the bottom of the page. You can see a little block. Cornerstone is made up of two words. The first is kephale, the emphasis on the last one, head. And gonia, which is angle or corner. And so they come up with cornerstone or most important stone. What's a cornerstone?
Is it the first one?
Historically,
Pennsylvania.
one today is not as important in that, right? I'm sorry, what did you say?
The cornerstone was the block
Yeah.
that they set all the lines off of.
And so when we see cornerstone as translation, that's what we think it is. But the scholars suggest instead it's the one that's over, not just over, in an arch, there's a stone that holds it all together.
That's the keystone. That's the keystone.
The keystone, okay, that's it. That's what they're suggesting. It is that one, which is interesting that they're making that suggestion because is it Paul, who in the New Testament he'll talk about Jesus as the chief stone. I think he uses chief stone, but we always have it as that cornerstone with the apostles as the foundation, and then we, living. No, it's 1 Peter, isn't it? It's 1 Peter, and going, and these stones growing up from that is that. But they're suggesting it's that keystone. Is that the right one? That would hold it all up there. And I don't know why. From the word, it seems like it's more the word itself. Well, I guess it's headstone, head corner, the stone in the head corner type thing. So maybe, I don't know. It's interesting. Formed an intersection of two lines, especially adjacent to streets or walls type things. So, and there's this point of that there is a stone outside Jerusalem that was rejected for use in the temple as well. And there's something connected to that as well. So there's this large stone, an important stone, that was then rejected for use and I'm trying to remember how it had become so important then. Let me check for a moment. I don't think I can find it. What happens when you have too many pages of notes? It's right here, it's right here, it's right here. And that's nothing. Okay. Can't find my note. So anyway, this stone, and obviously the stone would be referring to Jesus here, right? And being rejected by those groups of people again is becoming the most important stone in all of this. And what came about, this came about from the Lord and is wonderful in our eyes. Can you imagine the religious leaders hearing this parable and then Jesus saying this, hearing them understanding that he's talking about himself and them and how it's come about from God? Can you imagine the unhappiness that they would have? Why would you think they would want to do anything but verse 12? To kill? I mean, obviously, they would be livid because he's saying this is what they did. Wow. Jesus is not making friends here in chapter 12. He'll come up with, next time we'll look at God at Caesar, the Sadducees and the resurrection. I mean, questions about the Christ, the whole chapter, warning against scribes, the whole chapter is these questions and back and forth. Jesus silencing people as they keep coming at him again and again and getting more and more upset because of what he's saying. By what authority do you do these things? And the authority becomes clear and clear that he's working with God's authority, and they do not like this at all. We want nothing to do with this at all. Nothing. It's quite amazing. I thought we'd go longer than this. That's why I only brought out this much stuff. Don't have the next set prepared. Sorry, been a long week. I don't know. Do you want to start? Oh, you don't have text, though, do you? I'm sorry, don't bring it. So never mind. We won't do that.
I'll ask a question if you want.
Okay, we have scholars here. They can answer the question for you.
Would you say this parable is kind of stuck to be relevant only in its time, concerning the Sadducees and the leaders of the time, or in today's world, would it more be relevant to the church, modern church, or the world? In other words, like culture and the world rejecting the cornerstone, or the church itself not being, false churches that are out there, not really.
Okay, so it's a two-part question.
Yeah.
The first part is, does it only apply then at that point?
Right.
If it applies wider, who would it apply to?
Right.
Okay. Scholars, what do you think? I think it applies then, obviously. Does it apply now? I think we could look at that. If it's going to apply, I think I would apply it to church as opposed to world, because Jesus is using it to talk about, specifically about, I guess for lack of a better term, I'll call it the church at that time. So I think leaders are called to, be careful and to do as you were told. So I think it could fit in that, possibly. I think we might be stretching it. I think this parable is told specifically to that group, three groups of people, directly in response to by what authority he's telling them that you have messed up, you have not followed through with what you're supposed to do. You haven't kept the agreement. Because there's this written agreement. You have not kept the law. And remember, these are the groups that, with the written law, they also talk about the oral law. And how the oral law, in my humble opinion, seems to become as important, if not more important, than the written law. And it's the interpretations of that that are even more important than the text itself. I mean, so each time we keep getting farther and farther away. And I think that's the issue, that he's trying to draw them back to God. Basically, God sent me. I do it from his authority. Look how you're messing up. The clearing of the temple is used by some people as saying that you should not have any fundraising activities in the church because you're getting in the way. I think in a fellowship hall, is that the same as doing it in the sanctuary? Do we have a place where we do not have people come and join us in worship? I mean, there are a lot of differences with that. But it is used by people who try to apply that even to today's situation. I was at one church where we could have no fundraisers of any kind except the ladies could do one because they had the power and nobody else had the power to do it. I mean, so that was funny to me. That they could do theirs, and they had every year they had two things. They filled the fellowship hall, which is a little smaller than this, with all sorts of
So,
things that people wanted to buy.
Or
I
not so
remember
much.
going there once, and to get into my office, I had to walk through the front doors of the fellowship hall, and these people were giving me the evil eye because I was trying to get in there and get the deals before they could get them. I work here, I'm not trying to get anything, I work here, I'm not. They almost rushed the door as I went. It was crazy. But so they could do food, and they could sell these precious items, and people came for those. But nobody else could because we can't do money changing in the church. And I'm going, I don't know. That seemed to be an interesting interpretation. So I'm not sure that would really apply to today. If it's going to, I think we could think about what Jesus would say about church and how leaders, if it's talking about leaders, and it would really be about leaders and how the leadership is doing. That's why Fred's sitting there so quietly, because he's afraid that he will be judged in this way. No.
one step ahead of the wall.
Stay quiet.
Right.
Stay
A
quiet.
low profile.
Are they starting to really, you say they recognize that he says his authority comes from God. Do you think they believe that his authority comes from God?
No. I don't think so.
Yeah, that's kind of how I was feeling about it.
But they're getting the idea that he thinks it does.
No,
His
yeah, I get
followers thinks it does.
Mhm.
Also,
And there are some who do. You know, because remember the Nicodemus, who was a member of the Sanhedrin.
Mhm.
So and who was the other guy? What's another guy? I'm sorry.
I was going to say, when you started preaching in the temples and stuff, they were astounded by how he preached with authority. Like they were mesmerized by how much he knew and how authoritative he was with his.
Well, he taught in a way that's different than anybody else,
Right.
because the typical rabbi would refer back to what his rabbi had referred to, which his rabbi, and so it's always quoting people going back. And so Jesus is speaking new in new ways on his own. And so that's basically, who said you could do that? I mean, authority is all the way through. If you go back to the beginning of our study, you could see that. Who said you could cleanse this man on the Sabbath, right? Who said you could do that? There are 7 days in the week. Do it the 7 days. Why are you doing it here? I mean, continues to do this again and again. The question of by whose authority. But again, the fascinating thing to me is they don't question whether what he did was right or wrong. I mean, that to me, that's like, do you think it's okay to what he did? Or is it just who said he could do it? I mean, that's just interesting to me. That never said that was wrong.
Of the authority that they had or would refer to, which is the Old Testament, right? That's all they had.
Well, they have their scriptures.
And so we're talking about the rabbis, not the Pharisees, right? Not the rulers, but we're talking about the religious people.
The groups that we're talking about would be the religious rulers, yeah.
Did they have their own set of rituals and things that may have evolved, but are not specific?
They have those that are
Testament?
specified from what we would call the Old Testament, but I think some of the practices have changed over time, yes.
That's what I'm
And
saying.
so they're following those ways and such, yeah. But remember, they have laws that they can say, we can't put this guy to death because, I mean, we could do everything, but we can't do that, right? Because that's against the law. But they have all these other things they could have done. They could have taken out and beat him and all sorts of things to Jesus. So there are lots of rules and regulations, power that they did have, but because the Roman overlords, they could not do everything. And that obviously caused them great distress.
It's It's easy for me to think of them as they didn't want this guy coming in and taking their authority, and they had the authority and they had the power, and they didn't want this guy coming and taking it over. But it's also what they've given their whole life to and what they believe and what they think. So I'm sure it wasn't all just them not wanting to lose their power, but them not wanting someone to come in and corrupt what they've been taught is the way it should be. So I think sometimes I'm more judgmental against them, thinking, yeah, they just had all this power and didn't want to lose it. But they also didn't want, they were trying to protect what they thought was true. So it kind of has two sides to it.
Well, you can go to the Reformation time. Same thing, right? I've been taught this. This is what I've been taught. And now you're saying what?
Yeah.
I mean, you're saying that it's all grace. It's not what I do. I can't contribute to that. I've been taught that for years. I can buy my indulgence and I can buy my way out. I mean, this is how I've been raised, type thing. Or think of Peter. Who's trying to follow the dietary laws of the Jewish faith after he's a Christian, right? When he's at one point he's keeping kosher, and then another point he's eating other foods with some of the Gentile believers, except when the group we call Judaizers who come from Jerusalem, that those Christians who are saying that you have to live as a Jew in order to be a Christian, keep all of that. And then he goes back to that, and Paul comes down on him for his hypocrisy. But then Peter later on has this vision from God, right? Remember the vision of this white sheet coming down? I think it's white sheet coming down with all this unclean food. Eat. No, I can't do that. No. I think it's 3 times, 2 times, 3 times it comes down. And then finally, it's like, God's saying that this is okay. But his whole life, he had been taught this, he had lived this, and now you're saying it's completely different. That's a very difficult thing to change. So yeah, there's going to be resistance, especially if you're in a position of leadership and have someone question what you're doing. I think that's the natural human reaction as well. And I think we see part of that. Yeah, we see it all around us today, right? With leadership and things like that. But not in the church, right? This church is perfect. We don't have any laws. I can't tell the reaction because of the face.
It's very stoic.
Okay. Well, we're going to close at this point. Next time, we'll be prepared for a little bit farther. We'll go at least through the part on God through Caesar, the Sadducees, and the resurrection. Oh, that's fun. And then possibly one more section there. So we'll go away next week. So let's please conclude with a short prayer and let you go your way to whatever you're doing next. So we pray. Gracious Lord, help us, we pray, that we might see that you do have all authority on heaven and on earth. Help us to see that you reign even today in the midst of whatever's going on in our world. And Lord, help us to be people who are faithful to the calling you give us. So a parable such as this would not apply to us in any way, shape, or form, but that we might be faithful in carrying out your commands. So help us, Lord, as we continue to search the scriptures, to continue to follow you as you, through your Spirit, will guide us in that direction. So be with us as we continue on our way this day and this week. Keep us safe and in your care in these uncertain times. We ask it in Jesus' most precious name. Amen.